I was just fixing her plumbing. That's all it was supposed to be. A simple Tuesday morning call about a leaky pipe, maybe a clogged drain. Nothing that would change my life forever. Nothing that would make me question everything I thought I knew. About second chances, about age, about what it means to really stay with someone when the world tells you to walk away. But life has a way of turning ordinary moments into extraordinary stories, doesn't it? The morning started exactly like any other. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My alarm clock, one of those ancient digital ones with the red numbers that burn into your retinas, went off at 6:30 a.m. with its usual aggressive beeping. I rolled out of bed in my cramped studio. Apartment above Jameson's hardware store, where I'd been living for the past 8 months since my divorce. The place smelled like WD-40 and regret, but the rent was cheap and Tom Jameson, the owner, didn't ask too many questions about why a 35-year-old plumber was starting over. Coffee first. Always coffee first. I made it the way my ex-wife Miranda used to hate, strong enough to wake the dead, black as midnight, in a mug that had seen better decades. She always said it would stunt my growth. I looked around my 400-square-foot kingdom and thought maybe. She had a point, just not about my height. Breakfast was a Pop-Tart, brown sugar cinnamon, because I'm not a complete savage, eaten standing up while checking my phone for the day's calls. 3 missed texts from my younger brother Albert. He's probably updating me about his latest get-rich-quick scheme involving cryptocurrency and essential oils. 1 voicemail from my mother asking if I was eating enough vegetables and whether I'd met any nice girls yet. Mom, bless her persistent heart, still believed in my capacity for romantic redemption, despite all evidence to the contrary. The work phone rang just as I was pulling on my boots. Burton Plumbing, Martin speaking. Thank God you answered. The voice was warm, slightly accented. Maybe Puerto Rican. And tinged with the kind of desperation that comes from standing in a kitchen full of water at 7 a.m. This is Lita Hardy on Sycamore Street. I have a ... situation. I grabbed my notepad, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder. What kind of situation, Mrs. Hardy? The kind where I'm standing in an inch of water, my kitchen sink is making? Sounds like a dying whale, and my coffee maker is floating past my ankles, like it's on some very depressing cruise. Despite myself, I smiled. Okay, that's definitely a situation. What's the address? 1247 Sycamore Street. The blue house with the stubborn rose bushes and the mailbox that leans like it's had a few drinks. I knew the neighborhood, older homes, established trees. It's the kind of place where people actually knew their neighbors' names and borrowed cups of sugar without irony. I can be there in 20 minutes. I'll be the woman in rubber boots holding a mop like it's a sword, and I'm about to battle the ocean. After hanging up, I loaded my van with the usual suspects: pipe wrench, snake, plunger, replacement fittings, and my emergency backup coffee in a thermos that had survived 3 relationships. And countless plumbing disasters. The drive through downtown took me past all the familiar landmarks of my unraveling life. The diner where Miranda told me she wanted a trial separation. The courthouse where we made it official. The bar where I spent too many nights thinking. I could drink my way back to feeling normal. Sycamore Street was a different world. Tree-lined, quiet, with houses that looked like they'd been loved for decades rather than just lived in. I found 1247 easily. The blue house wasn't actually blue anymore, more of a faded denim color that suggested it had been weathering storms for a while. The rose bushes were indeed stubborn, sprawling across the front yard like they owned the place. The mailbox did lean at a jaunty angle, giving the whole property a slightly whimsical air. I parked behind a silver Honda Civic that had seen better years but was meticulously clean. A small Puerto Rican flag hung from the rearview mirror, and there was a hospital parking permit on the dashboard. Nurse, maybe, or doctor. Someone who worked long hours and cared about saving lives. Before I could knock, the front door opened. And there she was. Lita Hardy was not what I expected, though. I'm not sure what I had expected. She was maybe early 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver that she'd pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore scrubs navy blue with small white flowers and yellow rubber boots that came up to her knees. In her right hand, she wielded a mop like she was ready to take on Poseidon himself. "You must be Martin," she said, and her smile was the kind that made you feel like you'd just walked into sunlight after being underground for too long. "The plumbing knight in shining armor." "That's me," I said, hefting my toolbox. Though the armor's more like dented metal and good intentions. She stepped aside to let me in, and I immediately understood the whale sound she'd mentioned. Somewhere in the house, pipes were groaning and gurgling like they were having an existential crisis. The hardwood floors in the entryway showed water damage, not recent, but evidence that this wasn't the first time the house had tried to become an aquarium. Started about an hour ago, she explained, leading me toward the kitchen. I was getting ready for work. I'm a nurse at St. Mary's. Night shift, and suddenly, it sounded like someone was torturing an accordion in my walls. The kitchen told the story of someone who lived there, really lived there. Photographs covered the refrigerator, family gatherings, graduation ceremonies, candid moments of laughter. A well-used cookbook lay open on the counter, splattered with evidence of actual cooking. Plants lined the windowsill, healthy and green, suggesting someone who could keep things alive. And yes, there was definitely water. Not quite ankle deep anymore, but enough to make every step a small adventure. "The main problem seems to be under the sink," she said, pointing to where a small waterfall was creating its own personal rainstorm. "But I think it's connected to something bigger. The bathroom pipes have been making angry noises for weeks." I set down my toolbox and knelt to assess the damage, already knowing this was going to be more complicated than a simple Tuesday morning fix. But something about the way she said something bigger made me think. She wasn't just talking about pipes. Sometimes the best stories start with the worst plumbing. Under the kitchen sink was a crime scene of amateur plumbing. Someone and I had my suspicions about who had attempted repairs using duct tape, cable ties, and what appeared to be part of a garden hose. Water was spraying from 3 different joints, creating a miniature water park that would have been charming if it weren't slowly destroying someone's home. "Let me guess," I said, pointing to the creative pipe configuration. "Your ex's band was handy." Lita laughed, but there was a tired edge to it. Kurt was convinced YouTube University could teach him anything. Apparently the curriculum was lacking in actual plumbing fundamentals. I reached under the sink to turn off the main water valve, my shoulder brushing against hers as she leaned in to hold a flashlight. She smelled like hospital disinfectant and something warmer, vanilla, maybe, or cinnamon. Something that suggested she baked cookies when she wasn't saving lives. "There," I said as the water stopped its enthusiastic escape. "Crisis temporarily averted, though I'm going to need to basically rebuild this entire connection." She straightened up, pushing a strand of silver-streaked hair behind her ear. "How bad is it? Please don't sugarcoat it. I've seen enough medical situations to handle the truth." I appreciated that directness. Miranda used to get upset when I explained exactly what was wrong with things, our marriage included. "It's not catastrophic," I said honestly. "But it's not a Band-Aid fix either. Your ex-husband's creative solutions have created some problems that are going to take time to sort out properly." "Of course they have." She sighed, then looked at me with those dark eyes that seemed to carry stories. "Can I ask you something? Shoot. Do you drink coffee?" "Real coffee, not that instant stuff." It was such an unexpected question that I laughed. "I live on coffee." "Why?" "Because I make excellent coffee and you look like someone who could use a cup. Plus, if you're going to be here for a while fixing Kurt's disasters, we might as well be civilized about it." 5 minutes later, I was sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of coffee that was genuinely exceptional, rich, smooth, with none of the bitter bite I was used to from my own brewing attempts. The table was solid wood, worn in places with rings from countless mugs and the kind of scratches that come from actual living. "This is incredible," I said, taking another sip. "What's your secret?" "My grandmother's method," she said, settling across from me with her own mug. "She taught me that good coffee, like most good things, requires patience and attention." Kurt never understood that. He wanted everything instant, efficient, optimized. She gestured toward the sink. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As you can see, that philosophy didn't work out so well. I studied her face while she talked. There were laugh lines around her eyes, but also deeper lines that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. Her hands wrapped around the coffee mug were steady nurse hands, I realized. Hands that had held IVs and comforted frightened patients and dealt with emergencies that made plumbing problems seem trivial. "How long have you been divorced?" I asked, then immediately second-guessed myself. "Sorry, that's none of my business. It's fine. 2 years next month." Kurt decided he needed to find himself, which apparently required a 28-year-old yoga instructor named Harmony. She said the name like it tasted bad. He found himself all right. Found himself served with divorce papers and a very expensive lesson about community property. "I'm sorry." "That's rough," she shrugged. "Actually, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it at the time. How about you? Married? Divorced? Complicated? Divorced?" 8 months now. Miranda decided I wasn't ambitious enough. Apparently being a plumber doesn't qualify as having life goals. That's ridiculous. Plumbers keep civilization running. Without you, we'd all be living in medieval squalor. Diseases would run rampant, and society would collapse. You're basically a hero. I nearly choked on my coffee. I don't think Miranda saw it quite that way. Miranda sounds like she lacked vision. There was something about the way she said it, not bitter or angry, just matter of fact, that made it made me want to keep talking. She wasn't wrong about the ambition thing, though. I've been doing the same job for 15 years, living in the same small world, not really, ... growing. Lita leaned forward slightly. "Can I tell you something I've learned? Growth doesn't always mean climbing ladders or making more money or impressing people with titles. Sometimes growth means becoming more yourself, not less. Not times it means choosing contentment over constant striving." Is that what you did? I'm trying to... After the divorce, I realized I'd spent 23 years trying to be the wife Kurt wanted instead of being myself. It's harder than it sounds, figuring out who you are when you're not trying to be what someone else needs. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The apartment I'm living in now? It's above a hardware store. 400 square feet, no dishwasher, a shower that only works if you hit it at the right angle. Miranda would have hated it. "Do you hate it?" I thought about it. "No, actually I kind of like it. It's simple, honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is." She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Exactly. There's something to be said for authentic simplicity. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The kitchen quiet, except for the occasional drip from the sink and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a dog barked, and someone started a lawnmower. Normal Tuesday morning sounds in a normal neighborhood, except nothing about this felt normal anymore. "I should probably get back to your pipes," I said finally, though. I didn't particularly want to leave the table. "Of course, but Martin, yeah, thank you for the honest assessment. I mean, and for not treating me like I'm helpless just because I'm a woman who called for help." I stood up, carrying my empty mug to the sink out of habit. "Thank you for the coffee, and for not treating me like I'm just a guy with a wrench." As I knelt back down to examine the plumbing disaster, I found myself thinking that maybe some repairs were worth taking time with. Working under Lita's sink turned into something I hadn't experienced in years, a conversation that flowed as naturally as water should through properly installed pipes. While I dismantled Kurt's creative plumbing interpretations, she refilled my coffee mug and told me stories that painted a picture of a life fully lived. "I've been a nurse for 28 years, she said, leaning against the counter while I wrestled with a particularly stubborn fitting. Started when I was 24, right out of nursing school. Back then, I thought I'd save the world one patient at a time." "What made you choose nursing?" I asked, my voice slightly muffled as I reached deeper under the sink. "My little brother Tommy had asthma, severe asthma. We spent a lot of time in hospitals when I was growing up, and I watched these nurses work magic. Not just medical magic, but emotional magic. They made scary places feel safe, turned chaos into calm. I wanted to be that person for other families. Hey, paused in my work. Is he okay? Your brother? He's a respiratory therapist now in Seattle. Married, 2 kids, lungs working perfectly. Sometimes the stories have happy endings. There was something in her voice, a gentleness mixed with strength, that made me want to know more. What about the stories that don't have happy endings? She was quiet for a moment. Those are harder, but they're part of it too. You learn that sometimes your job isn't to save everyone. Sometimes it's just to make sure no one dies alone, or scared, or feeling like they don't matter. I thought about that while I measured pipe for replacement. Miranda had always gotten uncomfortable when conversations turned deep. She preferred surface-level pleasantries. Weather talk, discussions about vacation plans, we never quite took. But Lita seemed comfortable with weight, with the real stuff that most people spend their lives avoiding. What about you? She asked. Have you always been a plumber? Since I was 20, I said, carefully threading new pipe into place. Dad was a plumber. His dad was a plumber. It's kind of the family business, though that makes it sound more grand than it is. There's nothing wrong with tradition. Some things work because they've been tested by time. That's what I always thought, Miranda. She had different ideas. She wanted me to go back to school, get a business degree, maybe start my own company. Bigger things, she called it. Did you want bigger things? It was such a simple question, but no one had ever asked me directly. I thought I did. For a while I tried to want what she wanted, but honestly, I'd like fixing things. I like that moment when something broken starts working again. I like that people call me when they're in trouble, and I can usually help. It sounds pretty important to me. I emerged from under the sink to look at her. Really? Martin, I spend my nights keeping people alive, and it's meaningful work. But you know what's also meaningful? Making sure people have clean water, working toilets, functional kitchens. You provide basic human dignity. That's not small. No one had ever framed my work that way. Miranda saw it as limitation. Lita saw it as service. The difference was staggering. Can I ask you something personal? She said, settling into the chair across from where I was working. Sure. When did you know your marriage was over? I sat back on my heels, considering. You want the moment or the process? Both. The process was gradual. Like a slow leak, you don't notice it at first, but eventually you're standing in water and wondering how you got there. We stopped talking about real things. Everything became logistics, bills, schedules, whose turn it was to pick up groceries. We became roommates who happened to share a bed in the moment. I smiled ruefully. She brought home brochures for graduate programs, MBA programs specifically. Laid them out on the kitchen table like evidence in a trial. She said, Martin, you're 34 years old. Don't you want to be something more than a plumber? The way she said something more like what I wasn't enough? Like I wasn't enough? Lita's expression softened. That must have hurt. It did? But you know what hurt more? Realizing she was right, in a way. Not about plumbing being lesser. Work. But about me not being enough. For her anyway. We wanted different lives, and neither of us was wrong. We were just wrong for each other. What about you? I asked. When did you know with Kurt? Laughed, but there was no humor in it. The night I came home from a particularly brutal shift, we'd lost a patient, a young father with 2 kids, and I just needed someone to hold me while I cried. Kurt was in the garage installing some complicated sound system for his man. Cave. I stood in the doorway and said, I lost someone tonight. He didn't even look up from his speakers. Just said, that's rough, babe. Can you grab me a beer while you're up? Jesus. That's when I knew. 23 years of marriage, and my husband couldn't spare 5 minutes to comfort me after watching someone die. That's when I realized we weren't partners anymore. We weren't even friends. I finished tightening the connection and tested the joint. No leaks. I'm sorry. That's awful. It was liberating, actually, once I admitted we were strangers. Living in the same house, I could start figuring out what I actually wanted my life to look like. What? And what do you want it to look like? She was quiet for a long moment, watching me pack up my tools. Honest. I wanted to be honest. No more pretending. To be someone I'm not to make someone else comfortable. There's no more settling for surface when I crave depth. I want conversations like this one. Real conversations with people who aren't afraid of complicated feelings. I stood up, testing the faucet. Water flowed clear and strong. No drips, no unusual noises. Well, your kitchen plumbing is officially honest now. No more creative solutions hiding the real problems. Thank you for all of it, the pipes and the conversation. Thank you for the coffee, for making me think about things differently. As I gathered my tools, I realized I didn't want to leave. This kitchen, this conversation, this woman who talked about depth like it was a necessary nutrient. It all felt like something I'd been missing without knowing it. 3 hours had passed like 30 minutes. I'd completely rebuilt the sink connections, tested every joint twice, and even fixed a loose faucet handle that had been wobbling for months, according to Lita. We'd talked through lunch. She made sandwiches while I worked. Turkey and Swiss on bread that actually had substance to it, not the processed stuff I usually grab from gas stations. The conversation had meandered through everything and nothing. Her daughter Barbara, who was finishing her junior year at State University studying environmental science. My brother Albert's latest venture involving something called artisanal pickle subscriptions. Her mother, who still called every Sunday to check if she was eating enough plantains. My father, who taught me that a job worth doing was worth doing right the first time. I was gathering my tools, the job officially complete when she said it. Martin, she was standing by the kitchen window, looking out at her backyard where a bird feeder hung from an old oak tree. Can I ask you something? Sure. I closed my toolbox, expecting a question about maintenance or when I'd need to come back to check on the work. She turned to face me. There was something different in her expression. Vulnerable, determined, almost defiant. Would you stay? With me, even if I'm 52? I'm not joking. The question hit me like cold water. I froze, my hands still on the toolbox handle, my brain scrambling to process what she'd just asked. The kitchen went completely silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn. She continued quickly, her words tumbling out like she needed to explain before I could respond. Not necessarily me, specifically. Not right now, but would you? Stay with someone like me. Someone who's 52 and set in some ways, but still figuring out others. Someone who works night shifts and comes home exhausted and sometimes cries watching commercials about dogs finding homes. Someone who has a grown daughter who's protective and suspicious of any man who shows interest in her mother. I straightened up slowly, studying her face. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a hypothetical conversation starter or casual curiosity. She was serious, not desperate, not fishing for compliments, just honestly asking one of the most vulnerable questions I'd ever heard. Someone, she continued, who owns a house that apparently has more problems than solutions, who sometimes forgets to take off her scrubs before going to the grocery store, who still talks to her ex-husband's mother. Because the woman has no other family, and it seems cruel to cut her off just because her son is an ass. She paused, taking a breath. Someone who's been married for 23 years and divorced for 2 and has no idea how any of this works anymore. Dating, I mean? Or whatever this is called when you're past 50 and everyone assumes you should. Be satisfied with settling for companionship instead of actual connection? I realized I was holding my breath. Lita ... I know it's a weird question, she said, rushing on. I know we just met. I know you're younger and probably have your whole life. It's planned out and definitely don't need a middle-aged nurse with complicated emotions and a mortgage. But sitting here today talking with you, I remembered what it feels like to have a real conversation with someone. To laugh about actual funny things instead of politely chuckling at things that aren't funny, because it's easier than silence. She walked closer, stopping about 3 feet away. I guess I just wanted to know, ... Is it possible? In theory, could someone like you be interested in someone like me? Or am I fooling myself thinking there could be something here? The honesty in her voice was staggering. No games, no coy flirting, no testing the waters with carefully calculated moves. Just a woman asking a direct question about something that mattered to her. I said slowly, it would depend on a few things. Her face fell slightly, and I realized she was bracing for rejection. It's like whether she makes coffee this good, I continued. And whether she talks to plumbers like they're actual human beings instead of just service providers. Whether she's the kind of person who makes sandwiches for someone fixing her sink, and whether she asks real questions that make you think about things you haven't thought about in years. Hope flickered in her eyes. To ask impossible questions that most people spend their whole lives avoiding? I finished. She smiled then, not the polite social smile from earlier, but something real and slightly trembling. So that's a maybe? I haven't stopped thinking about this conversation since it started. And I've been trying to figure out how to ask if I could come back sometime when your pipes don't need fixing, really. Really, though I should probably mention that I'm 35, live above a hardware store, and my last relationship ended because I apparently lack sufficient ambition. You might be able to do better, Martin, she said softly. I just asked. A plumber I met 4 hours ago, if he would hypothetically date a 52-year-old nurse. I think we're both operating outside our comfort zones here. We looked at each other across the kitchen, and something shifted. Not dramatic, not movie scene romantic, just ... possible. Like a door opening that neither of us had noticed was there. 2 days later, I found myself driving back to Sycamore Street with a toolbox full of equipment I didn't actually need. Told myself I was just checking on the repair work, professional follow-up, quality assurance, that sort of thing. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Lita's question, about the way she'd looked when she asked it, about the conversation that had felt more real than anything I'd experienced in months. I'd barely knocked when the door opened. But it wasn't Lita who answered. Instead, I found myself face to face with a woman in her 70s. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a floral housecoat and an expression of deep suspicion. "You must be the plumber," she said, looking me up and down like I was a suspicious package left on her doorstep. "I'm Mona Jameson from next door. I was just bringing Lita some of my famous banana bread when I saw your van pull up." The way she said famous suggested her banana bread had a reputation, though I couldn't tell if it was good or bad. "Yes, ma'am, Martin Burton. Just following up on some work I did earlier this week. Follow-up work." She repeated the words, like they tasted strange. How thoughtful and how thorough of you. Before I could respond, Lita appeared behind her, still in scrubs but looking more rested than she had on Tuesday. "Mona, thank you for the bread. Martin, come in. I was just telling Mrs. Jameson about the wonderful job you did with the kitchen sink." "Oh, I'm sure it was wonderful," Mona said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Though I have to say, Lita, in my day, plumbers came, fixed what was broken, and left. They didn't make multiple visits for follow-up work." The air in the entryway suddenly felt thick with implication. I glanced at Lita, who had gone slightly pink around the ears, but was maintaining her composure with what I recognized as practiced nursing shift diplomacy. "Well," Lita said smoothly, "Martin is very thorough. He wants to make sure everything is working properly before he considers the job complete." "I'm sure he does," Mona replied. Though I couldn't help but notice his van was here for quite a while on Tuesday, 3.5 hours, to be precise. Well, that seems like a long time for a simple sink repair. I realized I was witnessing something more complex than neighborly concern. This was a territorial challenge, a social audit disguised as casual conversation. Mona Jameson wasn't just delivering bread. She was delivering a message. "Sometimes these old houses surprise you," I said carefully. "What looks like a simple problem can turn out to be more complicated once you get under the surface." "Oh, I'm sure they can," Mona said, her eyes never leaving my face, especially when the homeowner is a single woman who might not know the difference between necessary work and unnecessary complications. The insult was subtle, but unmistakable. I felt my jaw tighten, but Lita stepped smoothly into the silence. "Mrs. Jameson?" she said, her voice maintaining its professional pleasantness, while somehow managing to convey steel underneath. "Been managing my own home maintenance for 2 years now. I think I can distinguish between necessary repairs and unnecessary complications. Of course, dear, I'm just looking out for you. This neighborhood has always been very traditional. People notice things, especially when there are age differences involved." There it was. It's the real message. delivered with the precision of a surgical strike. I was too young for Lita. Our interaction was inappropriate, and the neighborhood was watching. Age differences? Lita repeated, and I could hear something dangerous creeping into her tone. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, nothing specific, Mona backpedaled, but not very far. It's just that some arrangements can give people the wrong impression. You understand? A younger man, an older woman, extended visits, ... people talk. Them talk, Lita said, and the steel was no longer hidden. I'm a 52-year-old woman who owns her home and makes her own decisions. If I want to hire a plumber who takes pride in his work, that's my choice. If I want to offer him coffee while he works, that's also my choice. To make something inappropriate out of basic human kindness that says more about them than it does about me. Mona blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. Well, I was simply being concerned. Yes, I understand. Thank you for the banana bread. I'm sure it's delicious. It was a dismissal, politely delivered, but unmistakable. Mona clutched, her housecoat tighter, and managed a stiff smile, of course. Well, I should let you get back to your ... follow-up work. After she left, Lita closed the door and leaned against it, sighing deeply. I'm sorry about that. Mona means well, but she's appointed herself the neighborhood watch committee. Does she have a point? I asked. It's about people talking. Lita looked at me seriously. Probably. Does that bother you? I thought about it. Miranda would have been mortified by neighborhood gossip. She cared deeply about appearances, about what people thought, about maintaining the right image. But standing in Lita's entryway, still feeling the echo of her defense of R. Whatever this was, I realized I didn't care what Mona Jameson thought. Not really, I said, though I should probably mention that Tom Jameson owns the hardware store where I live. If Mona is his wife, ... she is. Then my landlord now knows about our unnecessary complications. Lita smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen since Mona's ambush. Are we having unnecessary complications, Martin? I hope so, I said, and meant it. I was testing the kitchen faucet for the third time, completely unnecessary. But it gave me something to do with my hands while Lita made fresh coffee, when the front door opened and a voice called out, Mom? Whose van is in the driveway? That would be Barbara, Lita said quietly, a mix of affection and apprehension in her voice. My daughter. She's supposed to be at university, but she comes home sometimes when she needs to do laundry or wants real food. A young woman appeared in the kitchen doorway, and the family resemblance was unmistakable. Barbara Hardy had her mother's dark eyes and direct gaze. But where Lita had learned diplomatic patience from years of nursing, Barbara radiated the confident suspicion of someone who'd appointed herself her mother's protector. She was maybe 21, wearing jeans and a State University sweatshirt, with her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow looked intentional. She looked from me to her mother to my toolbox, and back to me with the analytical precision of someone conducting a criminal investigation. Barbara, this is Martin Burton, Lita said. He's the plumber who fixed our kitchen sink. Martin, this is my daughter Barbara. Just following up on the work, I said, offering what I hoped was a non-threatening smile, making sure everything's holding up properly. Barbara's eyes narrowed slightly. Follow up on plumbing. That you already fixed? It wasn't a question. It was an accusation disguised as clarification. Well, I said, realizing how thin my excuse sounded. Sometimes these old systems, Mom. Barbara interrupted, her attention shifting to Lita. Can I talk to you for a minute, privately? Barbara, Lita said, her voice carrying a warning note. Martin is a guest in our home. I'm sure Martin understands that family comes first, Barbara replied, not taking her eyes off her mother. Don't. You, Martin. There was a challenge in her voice, a test. I recognized the dynamic immediately. I'd seen it with my own family after the divorce. The way people closed ranks to protect someone they loved from potentially making another mistake. Of course, I said. Should probably get going anyway. The follow-up looks good, Lita. Everything seems to be working properly. You don't have to leave, Lita said quickly. Barbara, whatever you want to say, you can say it here. Barbara crossed her arms. Fine, Mom. What's really going on here? Okay. Don't say it's just plumbing, because I've never seen you this. I don't know, flustered about home repairs before. I'm not flustered. You're wearing lipstick. Home in the middle of the day. You only wear lipstick to work, or when you're nervous about something. I glanced at Lita and noticed that she was, indeed, wearing lipstick. A soft pink that made her smile more noticeable. The fact that her daughter had cataloged this detail said everything about how closely Barbara watched over her mother. Maybe I just wanted to look nice, Lita said. For the plumber. For myself. Barbara turned to me. How old are you, Barbara? Lita's voice was sharp now. It's okay, I said. I'm 35. And you're here for follow-up work on a sink you already fixed. Yes, that's interesting, because I know a little about plumbing. My ex-boyfriend was a contractor, and follow-up visits aren't really standard practice unless there's a problem. Is there a problem with the work you did? She was smart, direct, and completely uninterested in social niceties. I found myself respecting her. Protective instincts, even as I recognized how uncomfortable this was for Lita. No, I said honestly. The work is solid. I came back because I wanted to see your mother again. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Barbara blinked, clearly not expecting such directness. Barbara, Lita said softly, I know you're trying to protect me. I know what happened with your father made you suspicious of men who show interest in me. But I'm allowed to have conversations with people. I'm allowed to enjoy someone's company. I know that, Barbara said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. It's just ... You haven't dated anyone since the divorce. Not really. And then suddenly there's this guy coming around for follow-up work, and you're wearing lipstick and making that face. What face? That face you get when you're trying not to smile too much because you think it makes you look foolish. Except it doesn't make you look foolish, Mom. It makes you look happy. I haven't seen you look actually happy in a long time. The fight went out of Lita's posture. Barbara ... Look, Barbara said, turning back to me. I don't know you. Maybe you're a great guy. Maybe you're not. But my mom has been through enough with men who made promises they didn't keep. She deserves someone who's serious about her, not someone who's just looking for a distraction. You're right, I said. She does deserve that. So what are you looking for? It was a fair question asked by someone who had every right to ask it. I looked at Lita, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Honestly, I'm trying to figure that out. Your mother asked me a question the other day that I can't stop thinking about. And sitting in this kitchen, talking with her, I feel more like myself than I have in months. So maybe what I'm looking for is the chance to figure out what that means. Barbara studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to her mother. He's not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone less honest. Dad was always full of explanations and excuses. This one just ... says what he thinks. Is that good or bad? Lita asked. Barbara shrugged. I guess we'll find out. The uncomfortable family meeting dissolved when Lita's phone rang, the distinctive, urgent ring of a work call. She glanced at the display and sighed. I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's the hospital. While she stepped into the living room to talk, Barbara and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen with nothing but awkward silence and the lingering tension of her interrogation. She opened the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of water, and studied me over the rim as she drank. So, she said finally, you really came back just to see her again. Yes, that's either really sweet or really creepy. I haven't decided which. I'm hoping for sweet. She almost smiled. Mom doesn't usually. After Dad, she kind of shut down, threw herself into work and to taking care of everyone else. She hasn't brought anyone around the house. Ever. I get the sense she's been through a lot. You have no idea. Barbara's expression darkened. Dad didn't just cheat on her with one person. It was a pattern. Multiple affairs over several years. Mom found out about all of them at once when some woman called the house looking for him. She'd been living a lie for half her marriage and didn't even know it. The revelation hit me like a punch to the chest. No wonder Lita had asked her question with such vulnerability, such careful hope. No wonder she'd been so direct about wanting honesty over performance. That's why I'm protective, Barbara continued. Mom rebuilt her entire life from nothing. This house, her independence, her sense of self-worth, she fought for all of it. And she's finally getting to a place where she's okay being alone. So if you're going to mess with that asterisk, I'm not going to hurt her, I said. That's what they all say. Barbara, I know you don't know me, but your mother is the first person I've met since my divorce who makes me want to be better than I am. Not different, better. That's not something I take lightly. She studied me for a long moment. What happened with your divorce? My ex-wife thought I lacked ambition. She wasn't wrong exactly. I was comfortable, maybe too comfortable. Not growing, not challenging myself. She wanted someone who was going places, and I was someone who was content to stay put. Are you still content to stay put? It was a good question. I thought I was. But talking with your mother, I realized I wasn't. Content, I was just afraid. Afraid of trying and failing. Afraid of wanting something and not getting it. Your mom asked me what I want my life to look like, and I realized I'd stopped asking myself that question years ago. Barbara's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, frowning. That's weird. Mom's calling me, but she's right here, she answered. Mom, even from across the kitchen? I could hear the tension in Lita's voice through the phone. Barbara, I need you to come here now. Don't bring Martin. Barbara's face went pale. What's wrong? Just come, please. Barbara hung up and looked at me with worried eyes. I have to. She's in the living room. Something's wrong. Go. I'll wait here. She disappeared toward the front of the house, and I found myself alone in Lita's kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable evidence of her life. Family photos. A well-used spice rack. A coffee mug that read World's Okayest Nurse. While trying not to eavesdrop on a conversation that was clearly serious, I couldn't make out words. But I could hear the tone. Barbara's voice rising with concern. Lita's remaining steady, but strained. Whatever the phone call had been about, it was bigger than scheduling or routine hospital business. After about 10 minutes, Barbara returned alone. Her face was grim. Where's your mom? I asked. Upstairs. She needs a few minutes. Barbara sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. That was her supervisor at the hospital. There's been a complaint filed against her with the nursing board. Kind of complaint? Patient care negligence? Someone claimed she administered the wrong medication dosage and tried to cover it up. Barbara's voice was tight with anger. It's complete bullshit. Mom is the most careful nurse on her floor. She double-checks everything, keeps meticulous records. She's never had so much as a written warning in 28 years. Who filed the complaint? They can't tell her that yet. But the timing is suspicious. She's been having issues with one of the new attending physicians, Dr. Richards. He's been pushing to replace some of the older nursing staff with newer graduates. Cheaper labor, supposedly more adaptable to modern protocols. I felt anger building in my chest. So this is retaliation? Maybe, probably, but it doesn't matter. Even if the complaint is dismissed, it goes on her record. It affects her reputation, her job security, her ability to transfer to other departments or hospitals. And the investigation process, ... It's brutal. They suspend you pending review, interview all your colleagues, go through months of your patient files. She could lose her job. She could lose her career. Her license. Everything she's worked for since she was 24 years old. Barbara's voice cracked slightly. And the worst part is, there's nothing we can do except wait and hope. The investigation clears her. It could take months. The implications hit me all at once. Lita's mortgage, her independence, her sense of identity that was so tied to her work, all of it was suddenly at risk. The woman who'd asked me if I would stay with someone complicated was about to become much more complicated than either of us had anticipated. Does she have a lawyer? I asked. She can't afford a lawyer. Do you know what nurses make? Even after 28 years, Barbara laughed bitterly. She's been so proud of managing on her own, of not needing anyone's help. And now, ... double quotes, now everything's falling apart. Everything's falling apart, Barbara confirmed. So maybe you should think about whether you really want to get involved with this mess, because it's about to get a lot worse before it gets better. I should have left. Any reasonable person would have recognized that getting involved with someone facing potential career destruction was a complication nobody needed. But as I sat in my van outside Lita's house, watching the curtains in her living room window, I realized I wasn't going anywhere. Barbara had been right. This was about to become a mess. But it was Lita's mess, and somehow that made all the difference. I knocked on the door 20 minutes later. Barbara answered, looking surprised to see me still there. I thought you left. I went to my van to think, I said. Then I realized I was thinking about the wrong thing. What do you mean? Your mom asked me if I would stay with someone complicated. I think I'd just got my answer. Barbara studied my face for a moment, then stepped aside to let me in. She's still upstairs? She's been up there for an hour, and I can hear her pacing. She does that when she's trying to solve problems that don't have solutions. Can I go talk to her? I don't know. Can you handle seeing her scared? Because my mom doesn't do scared in front of people. She's probably going to try to convince you this isn't a big deal, that she has everything under control, and you don't think she does? Barbara's laugh was hollow. Mom's been taking care of everyone else for so long, she's forgotten how to let people take care of her. She's going to try to protect you from this situation by pushing you away. I thought about that. What would you do if you were me? Honestly, I'd probably run. This is going to get ugly, and it's going to take a long time to resolve. But you asked what I'd do, not what I'd recommend. She paused. If I were you, and I cared about her, I'd stay. But I'd make it clear that I was staying because I wanted to, not because I felt sorry for her. The distinction was important, and I was grateful Barbara had made it. Pity would be the fastest way to lose Lita's trust. I found her in her bedroom, standing by the window overlooking the backyard. She'd changed out of her scrubs into jeans and a soft blue sweater, but her posture was rigid with tension. When she heard me in the doorway, she turned, and I could see she'd been crying. Not much, but enough. Yeah, you're still here, she said, and there was surprise in her voice. Where else would I be? Running for the hills. This is exactly the kind of complication that smart men avoid. I stepped into the room. Good thing I've never been accused of being too smart. She almost smiled. Martin, I need you to understand. This investigation, it's going to take months. Even if I'm cleared, my reputation at the hospital is going to be damaged. I might have to leave nursing altogether. Start over in some other field at 52. I might lose this house. Okay. Blinked. Okay? Okay, those are the facts. Now what? Now you should probably reconsider getting involved with someone whose life is falling apart. I sat on the edge of her bed, the first truly intimate gesture I'd made, and we both recognized it. Lita, 3 days ago you asked me if I would stay with someone complicated. Someone with night shifts and mortgage payments, and a grown daughter who asks hard questions. This is just more complicated than we thought. This is a lot more complicated. So the question is still the same. Are you asking me to stay, or are you telling me to go? She was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window again. I don't know how to ask for help. I've been on my own for 2 years, and before that, I was married to someone who made me feel like needing support was a character flaw. What if it's not about needing help? What if it's about wanting company while you figure this out? Is there a difference? There's a huge difference. One makes you weak, and one makes you human. She sat down beside me on the bed, and I could smell her shampoo, something clean and uncomplicated like lavender. I'm scared, she said quietly. I've been a nurse for almost 30 years. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. If I lose that ... then you'll figure out who you are without it. And you won't do it alone. You don't know what you're signing up for. Neither do you, I pointed out. Neither of us knows how this turns out. But I know I'd rather find out with you than wonder what might have happened if I'd walked away. She looked at me then, really looked at me. Why? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you make excellent coffee and ask honest questions. I know you've built a life on your own terms after someone tried to convince you that you weren't. Enough. I know you raised a daughter who's smart and fierce and protective because that's the kind of mother you are. And I know that sitting in your kitchen talking with you feels more real than anything I've done in years. And that's enough? Even with all this chaos? Especially with all this chaos? Anyone can be there for the easy parts. She leaned against me then, just slightly, her shoulder touching mine. I can't promise this is going to work out. Not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. To do what? To see where this goes? To be here while you fight this thing? To find out if what we started in your kitchen can survive in the real world? She was quiet for a moment. Then Barbara. Likes you? That's unexpected. She's protecting you. I respect that. And you're not intimidated by a 21-year-old who interrogates potential suitors? Should I be? Probably. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light fade in her backyard. Somewhere downstairs, Barbara was probably listening. For signs that her mother was okay, outside, the normal world continued. People came home from work, dogs barked, lawnmowers hummed. But up here in this room, everything had changed. So, Lita said finally, if you're really staying, what happens next? Next, we figure this out together, one day at a time. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I know the exact time because I'd been lying awake in my apartment above the hardware store, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Lita's investigation, which had been dragging on for 6 weeks with no resolution in sight. Martin was small, shaky in a way I'd never heard before. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else. ... Can you come over? Something's happened. I was dressed and in my van within 5 minutes. I found her sitting on her front porch steps in her pajamas and a winter coat, clutching her phone like a lifeline. The porch light cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look older, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. What happened? I asked, sitting beside her on the cold concrete. The pipes burst, she said, her voice flat with exhaustion. The main line? Barbara called me at the hospital. I picked up extra shifts to help with money while this investigation drags on. She was staying here tonight, studying for finals. When she heard this horrible sound from the basement, I looked toward the house and could see water stains on the foundation walls. Dark patches spreading like bruises in the dim light. The basement's flooded. Everything down there. My grandmother's photographs, Barbara's childhood art projects, boxes of nursing textbooks I've kept since school, 28 years of patient thank you cards, all of it just ... gone. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I realized this wasn't just about water damage. This was about the slow, systematic destruction of everything she'd built, everything she'd saved, everything that proved her life had mattered. The insurance adjuster came out an hour ago, she continued. Turns out there's an exclusion for gradual damage. Apparently, this pipe has been slowly deteriorating for months, maybe years. Kurt's DIY fixes just masked the problem until it couldn't be masked anymore. Where's Barbara? Inside, trying to salvage what she can. But Martin... She turned to look at me, and her eyes were red with tears she was trying not to shed. I can't afford this. The investigation froze my ability to pick up overtime shifts. I've been using credit cards just to make the mortgage payment, and now this. The weight of it all was crushing her, and I could see her trying to hold herself. Together, through sheer force of will. I keep thinking about what you said, she whispered, about anyone being able to be there for the easy parts. Well, this is the hard part. This is where you find out if you really meant it. Alita. I'm 52 years old. I'm sitting on my front porch at 4 in the morning because my house is literally falling apart around me. My career might be over, my savings are gone, and I have no idea how I'm going to fix any of this. So I need to know, are you staying or are you going? The question hung between us in the cold, pred-on air, more loaded than any she'd asked before. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was her life, broken and flooded and complicated beyond repair, asking me to choose whether I was in or out. I'm staying, I said. Now show me the damage. The basement was worse than I'd imagined. 3 inches of murky water covered everything, and the smell of mold was already beginning to settle into the damp air. Barbara was standing knee-deep in the mess, holding a soggy cardboard box that had once contained what looked like family. Photographs. She's hopeless, she said, when she saw us coming down the stairs. Everything's ruined. But as I surveyed the damage, something unexpected happened. My phone started ringing, then Lita's phone, then Barbara's. The first call was from Tom Jameson, my landlord, and Mona's husband. Martin, Mona saw the emergency. Vehicles at Lita's place? What's the situation? Burst pipe? You're flooding in the basement? I'll be there in 10 minutes with a pump and some shop vacs. The second call was Barbara's roommate from university, who was somehow already driving toward town with a carload of friends and cleaning supplies. The third was Lita's co-worker from the hospital. Apparently word had spread through the night shift nursing network that Lita was in trouble. By 6 a.m., Lita's house had become the center of an impromptu rescue operation. Tom Jameson arrived with professional-grade water extraction equipment. Mona, apparently feeling guilty about her earlier suspicions, showed up with industrial fans and homemade coffee cake. Barbara's college friends descended like a cheerful invasion force, armed with rubber boots and the kind of energy that only 20-year-olds possess at dawn. Most surprising was the appearance of Albert, my brother, who somehow materialized with a rental truck and a team of guys from his latest business venture. "How did you even know about this?" I asked him. Barbara posted on social media. Something about community support in crisis being her environmental science thesis topic. Smart kid, she's documenting the whole thing. I looked around and realized Barbara was, indeed, taking notes and pictures, turning her mother's disaster into an academic study of how neighbors respond to emergency. It was exactly the kind of practical thinking Lita would have done, but the real turning point came when Mrs. Jameson Mona approached Lita with an envelope. "What's this?" Lita asked. "Emergency fund," Mona said gruffly. "The neighborhood association keeps money for situations like this. Don't argue, just take it." "Yeah, Mona, I can." "You can and you will. And before you get all prideful about it, let me tell you something. When my Tom had his heart attack 3 years ago, you were the nurse who stayed past your shift to make sure he was stable. You held my hand in that waiting room when I was scared out of my mind. This isn't charity, this is community." Lita's eyes filled with tears. "I was just doing my job." "No," Mona said firmly. "You were being human. There's a difference." As the day progressed, the basement was pumped dry, damaged items were sorted into salvageable and lost, and a plan emerged for repairs. But more than that, something shifted in how Lita saw herself and her situation. "I spent 2 years trying to prove I could handle everything alone," she told me as we took a break on the front porch, watching the organized chaos of people helping. "I forgot that letting people help isn't admitting defeat, it's admitting you're part of something bigger than yourself." "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. "No," she said, leaning against my shoulder. "I think it might be the best thing that's happened to me in years." 3 weeks later, we were sitting in Lita's kitchen, the same kitchen where this had all started, drinking coffee and watching the sunset through her back window. The basement had been repaired, the investigation had finally concluded in her favor, and life was slowly returning to something resembling normal. But something fundamental had changed between us during those crisis weeks. The careful politeness of new attraction had been burned away by 4 a.m. Emergency calls and insurance paperwork, and the kind of exhaustion that strips away all pretense. "I got the official letter today," Lita said, pulling an envelope from the counter. "Full reinstatement, no disciplinary action. Formal apology from the hospital administration."
"How do you feel?"
She was quiet for a moment, considering. "Relieved, vindicated, but also ... different. Going through this whole thing made me realize something." "What's that?" "For 30 years, I defined myself by my job. I was a good nurse, therefore I was a good person. When that was threatened, I felt like I was disappearing." She turned to look at me. "But these past few weeks, watching how you showed up, how Barbara fought for me, how the neighbors rallied around us, ... I realized I'm not just what I do for work. I'm also the person people want to help when I'm in trouble." I set down my coffee mug. "That's a good realization." "It is. But it also makes me think about that question I asked you. It's the one that started all this." My heart did that familiar skip. "About staying with someone who's 52? About staying with someone complicated? Because, Martin, I need you to know, this is who I am. Someone whose pipes burst at inconvenient times, whose career occasionally gets threatened by petty office politics, whose daughter will always be protective and suspicious of any man in my life. This is the baseline level of complicated you'd be signing up for. And I realized I wasn't really asking if you'd stay with someone like me.
Nice.
I was asking if I was worth staying for. If a 52-year-old nurse with a mortgage and a complicated life and a tendency to cry at dog commercials could be someone worth building a life with. I stood up and walked around the table to where she was sitting. Can I tell you something? Yes. Morning, you first called me about your plumbing problem. I was sitting in my apartment eating a Pop-Tart and feeling sorry for myself, because my ex-wife was right. I wasn't ambitious enough. I wasn't growing. I was just existing. She looked up at me. And now I wake up thinking about whether you're working a day shift or a night shift. Whether Barbara passed her environmental science exam, whether Mrs. Jameson is going to approve of whatever I'm wearing when I come over, learning Spanish curse words from your mother's Sunday phone calls. I actually care about the hospital gossip you bring home. That's not ambition, she said softly. That's just caring about someone. Exactly. And for the first time in my adult life, caring about someone feels like enough, more than enough. I knelt down beside her chair. Lita Hardy, I would absolutely stay with you, even if you're 52, even if you're 62, even if your pipes burst every month and your daughter interrogates me annually, and Mrs. Jameson times my visits with a stopwatch. She smiled. The kind of smile that made me understand why people write songs about falling in love. Really? Really? The question is, do you want me to stay? Yes, she said without hesitation. 8 months later, I moved out of the apartment above Jameson's hardware store. Not because Tom kicked me out, though Mona had made several pointed comments about young men who overstay their welcome, but because Lita asked me to move in with her. Practically speaking, she'd said with that directness, I'd come to love. You're here most nights anyway. Barbara's graduated and moved to Seattle for her environmental consulting job. And splitting the mortgage makes more financial sense than you paying rent on a place you barely use. And impractically speaking, I'd asked. Impractically speaking, I like waking up next to someone who doesn't snore and makes better coffee than I do. I don't make better coffee than you do. You make different coffee? Yours tastes like ambition. Mine tastes like patience. The house looked different now. We'd replaced all the plumbing, not just the emergency repairs, but a complete system. Overhaul that would last another 50 years. The basement had been converted into a workshop where I could work on furniture projects, a hobby I'd rediscovered after Lita asked me what I did for fun besides fix other people's broken things. Barbara visited regularly, usually bringing her boyfriend David, who was appropriately intimidated by her and amused by me. She'd completed her thesis on community response networks in crisis situations. Using her mother's flood as a case study, it had earned her honors and a job offer in Seattle that she couldn't refuse. You know, she'd said during her last visit, before moving, I was wrong about you. How so? I thought you were going to be like Dad, all talk and good intentions until things got difficult, but you actually showed up. Even when it was inconvenient and expensive and messy, your mom's worth showing up for, she is, but so are you. The nursing investigation had led to Dr. Richards. Being quietly transferred to another hospital after it became clear he'd been systematically targeting experienced nurses who questioned his protocols. Lita was promoted to charge nurse on her floor, a position that came with better hours and the respect she'd always deserved. As for me, I'd started my own plumbing business. Burton Plumbing had 3 employees now and a reputation for honest work at fair prices. Miranda had been right about one thing. I did have more ambition than I'd thought. Just needed to find the right reason to use it. Do you ever wonder? Lita asked one evening as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, what would have happened if your original repair had held? If the pipes hadn't burst, if the investigation had never happened? Sometimes, I said. Do you? I think we would have found our way here eventually. Maybe it would have taken longer, been less dramatic. But the important things would have happened anyway. Like what? Like you realizing you wanted more from life than just getting by? Like me learning that I could trust someone to stay even? When staying got complicated, it's like both of us figuring out that love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone worth choosing. Every day, even when they're not. I pulled her closer. Even when they're 52? Especially when they're 52? Though for the record, I'm 53 now. I'll try to keep up. You don't have to keep up, she said, smiling. You just have to stay. And that, I realized, was exactly what I planned to do. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.